Hello, America. Tonight, we're going to take on the economy. We have done our homework, our research, a lot of it over the last year. Tonight, I just want to focus on the economy. I'm going to close the case on what Barack Obama has said is the fundamental transformation of our country. I believe it's the destruction of our monetary system. We've got a lot of work to do, so buckle up. Here we go. Hello, America. I brought my Zenith TV in from my childhood because I want to show you some old clips tonight. Tonight, I'm going to give you a hard concept to get your arms around. This one is difficult. This is what I think stops us from advancing any argument, because this is a concept where you have to come to believe that there are people in this country who want to intentionally collapse our economic system. How could any American, in any party, anybody you disagree with, want to collapse and do something like that? Well, those involved sleep fine at night because they tell themselves that they are not collapsing, they are just fundamentally transforming America into something they believe will be better. It is the progressive movement in which these people are involved. It started at the turn of the last century, and I just want to show you a little bit of what the progressive movement really was, because most people don't know. They hear progressives and they think it's okay. But progressives, these are the people that gave us the Federal Reserve. They brought us that concept. They brought us the concept of redistribution of wealth through a progressive income tax. Got it? They told us at the beginning that only the rich, the very rich, would be affected by this. We all pay income tax now, don't we? Or at least 50% of us do. These are the same people who felt they knew better about your health than you did. They said, well, people don't understand that alcohol is bad and they just won't stop drinking. So they gave us prohibition. These are the progressives. They also first started with the League of Nations. America rejected, but they learned their lesson and they jammed through the UN the next time. Then they also are the people that brought us the idea that the Constitution is fatally flawed and it evolves. They stopped teaching constitutional law, and they started teaching only case law in our universities around 1920. And they're also the people that told us that the founders were just rich, evil white guys. They were racist. That's the progressive movement. Now, something else you need to understand. Progressives don't speak the same kind of language that you and I do. Economic justice, that's Marxism. It's taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. Social justice, what is that? Well, let me quote Mark Lloyd, a guy I introduced you again to last night. Someone needs to step down so someone else can have a turn. And transforming America, I would say that that means collapsing the system as we know it and rebooting it as a progressive utopia. None of the language is the same, and that's why people get lost. What I would call socialist or communist, they'll call just social justice or progressive. That is critical to understand, because it really is what helps these people sleep at night and what's allowing them to get away with it. They really believe they're making things better, and they are about to finish the process that they started over 100 years ago. They learned from their early failed attempts to transform America back around the turn of last century with the League of Nations. It failed. Oh, that made this guy, Woodrow Wilson, crazy. He said, this is God's work. Well, what did they learn? Let me show you. They learned three things, and see if any of these sound familiar like today's America. To transform, this was what they learned with the United Nations and the League of Nations, you can't have a long debate, because this is what they did with the League of Nations. They let people debate. No. You can't have a debate. You also can't tell everybody your plans. You have to have it secret. Got it. Does any of this sound? I mean, Nancy Pelosi in the secret meetings today, and no debate on global warming. It's over. And then the third thing they learned, never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, as we discuss all of these things, I want you to keep watching tonight with your eyes. You will see what I'm going to lay out for you tonight, people trying to collapse our economy. But remember, progressives see this as a fundamental transformation, something better than we've already had, as promised by President Barack Obama.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
All right, so let me introduce you to the people who you would say are fundamentally responsible for the unsustainability and possible collapse of our economic system. There are really two people I've been telling you for a while. There they are, Cloward and Piven. Richard Cloward, Francis Fox Piven. They are authors of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Something else to remember is that this isn't some conspiracy theory that we're tossing out here. They wrote about collapsing the economy and how they plan to do it in an article they co-authored in the 1960s, Mobilizing the Poor, How It Could Be Done. 6 months later, published in The Nation under the title, The Weight of the Poor, a Strategy to End Poverty. Well, what is this strategy and who's involved? Well, do you remember on this program over the summer, the tree? Watch this. The roots of the tree of radicalism and revolution. It's Saul Alinsky. It's Woodrow Wilson. That's how it's all made legitimate. It's progressive. Here are the roots. Here's SDS. This is for that democratic society. Cloward and Piven come in and say, wait a minute, hang on just a second. What we should do is collapse the system on its own weight. Cloward and Piven, they're using the same tactics. Fear and intimidation of SDS. Cloward, Piven overwhelmed the system. And look who the president has. Wade Raskey, right up the tree. Dale, right up the tree. Bill Ayers, right up the tree. Jeff Jones, right up the tree. Okay. Cloward and Piven had a split. They were radical Columbia professors in the 1960s who believed in change and social justice. They were inspired by the riots in Los Angeles in 1965, and they wrote and published their article which outlined the best way to bring the type of Saul Alinsky social change to America. In their estimation, back in the 60s, overwhelmed the system. But SDS, they had radicals, and they said, no, we want to bomb things. They said, no, do it the smart way. Overwhelm the system and bring about the fall of capitalism by overloading the government bureaucracy with impossible demands and bring on economic collapse. Cloward and Piven instructed their activists that if a crisis didn't exist, think of this, promote or manufacture one by exaggerating some unthreatening predicament. Does health care come to mind, where we've got doctors pulling out tonsils and cutting off patients' feet? Really? How about global warming? Well, their methods have worked for years. From 1965 through 1974, due to the strategy and effort of Cloward and Piven and their followers, the total recipients on welfare rocketed from 4.3 million people to 10.8 million. In 1975, there were nearly 1 million welfare recipients in New York City alone. That year, New York City declared bankruptcy. The whole state nearly went down with them. If you're my age, you remember this. It was Cloward and Piven. In 1998, as he was still trying to deal with some of the fallout, 20 years later, Mayor Rudy Giuliani referred to the Cloward-Piven strategy, describing the economic sabotage. Watch this.
This wasn't an accident. It wasn't an atmospheric thing. It wasn't supernatural. It was the result of policies, choices, and a philosophy that was embraced in the 1960s and then enthusiastically endorsed in the city of New York.
Okay. He went on to say that this is the result of policies and programs designed to have the maximum number of people get on welfare. In the end, it didn't work for one reason, because Americans became horrified with the welfare state situation. As a result, Cloward and Piven and their devotees figured it out. They needed to be in the system. Well, we've shown you how they've done that. Here we go. Apollo Alliance, which he is the head of here in New York. So here it is, the stimulus bill. I'm outlining earlier this summer, the stimulus bill was written in large part by the Apollo Alliance. Who's on the board of the Apollo Alliance? Well, one of the alums is Van Jones. In New York, the Apollo Alliance is headed by this guy, Jeff Jones. Yeah, that's his mugshot there and his fingerprints. He is a partner for Bill Ayers. Why does he have a mugshot? Because their group, the Weather Underground, was bombing the United States. Got it? By the way, Bill Ayers, that's the guy who's in his living room, Barack Obama launched his political career in Chicago. Now, we've also shown you that George Soros is a source of funding for many of these radical groups, and that Soros and Jeff Jones went to one of the poorest sections in New York just recently and gave away hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of your tax dollars, stimulus money, gave it out. We've shown you the Acorn connections. These community organizers are receiving untold billions in your money despite massive voter registration fraud and corruption. Still, Congress will not turn off the spigot for more than about 60 days. Does it sound like somebody's trying to overload the system yet? How about if I throw in TARP, a massive, inexplicable bailout that America didn't want for people Obama himself described as fat cats? And by the way, you have progressives in both parties. I want to make sure this is not a Democratic Party thing. This is, John McCain is a progressive. You had the Republicans and the Democrats to thank for TARP.